And that's where we're going to begin here on the show. Kansas City needed a late penalty in order to defeat the Cincinnati Bengals, but now they'll need a running back behind Patrick Mahomes to carry the load because Isiah Pacheco has a broken fibula in his leg. It's being reported by multiple outlets, and he's headed to IR, which means a 4-week absence, but the speculation is it could potentially even be longer than that. And fibula is a leg, folks, so this is a broken leg going to keep him out. I mean, a month would be on the optimistic side, I think, here. So right now, Pacheco out for Kansas City, and it's not like they have a viable backup. Their former first-round pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, is on injured reserve as well, so they'll have to make some sort of move to pick up the pieces there. But at the very least, they are 2-0, and they needed every point that they could on a late fourth down penalty. The Chiefs end up getting a first down, and then Harrison Butker kicks a field goal. They were outplayed by the Cincinnati Bengals in this game, but as Chiefs magic would have it, they end up winning this one as Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and company end up winning, but not covering clearly that 6 or 5.5 point spread that was going into Sunday. Needless to say, Joe Burrow coming up just short in that game, a little argument with Jamar Chase in that game as well with some key penalties, but very dejected Burrow after the game talked about the loss.
We felt good about the game plan. I was seeing it well. We were protecting. Just didn't do enough to get it done.
How frustrating is this loss making for
As frustrating as I've had.
Why?
I'm going to have to kind of think about that one a couple days, and you might have to ask me that again on Wednesday.
Really candid Joe Burrow. They outplayed Kansas City. Should have won that game, in my opinion, without a doubt. You know who else should have won last night? The Chicago Bears, if they had any semblance of a game plan. What in the world was going on in that game last night? They have a first-round quarterback throwing to the running backs over and over. The Houston Texans was just like, here, go ahead and win the game. And the Bears couldn't. I mean, normally I'm sleeping at the end of these things, but I just couldn't believe it. I was watching this one from start to finish. 19-13, the final. Another underdog, by the way, covering in this one as Houston ends up winning. It was really their defense that gave Caleb Williams fits all day long. The Bears' offensive line struggled, that's for sure. But, I mean, you have DJ Moore, you have Odunze, and all these different weapons, and it just felt like they didn't either trust the line or trust the quarterback in this one. But good teams win and great teams cover. I guess that's fair to say. If you took the Bears, you came out on top. And we'll start with D'Amico Ryans, who knew that it was basically the defense that ended up carrying them in this one.
Well, it starts up front with our defensive line, like Will, Daniil, Mario, all the guys. The way they were rushing, like together, and the way we were covering in the back end, that really set things apart for us. So, credit to Sting and Kamari for the way they cover, allowing those guys to get the pressure. You don't get pressure unless the coverage is tight. So those guys cover well and allowed the rush to get there.
I think right now the defense of Houston carrying them for the most part played well against Indianapolis again last week as well. Meanwhile, on the offensive side for the Bears, again, Caleb Williams, top pick in the draft, struggling through his first 2 games. They did beat Tennessee thanks to some big mistakes by Tennessee. Caleb Williams after the game last night basically talking about the key word of the NFL these days, execution.
Not coming out with a win, not executing, when we needed to as a team. Myself throwing 2 interceptions. It's not something that I've done. Something that I do is turn the ball over. It's not really my thing. So, I think those things probably the things that I'm most, frustrated about, back out there, we didn't execute the way we needed to. And, we're going to keep getting better. Everything's about the responses. It's week 2. It's what the guys are. Obviously, I'm, a young guy, but I understand it's a long season. Understanding that it's week 2, understanding that we're going to respond, and, just get better every day, get better at practice. All these different things throughout the weeks, attention to details and things like that.
Still a long season, but Justin Fields, Caleb Williams don't look that much different to me, at least through a couple of games. All right, let's get to the other games in the NFL. The New York Jets pick up their first win of the season. They needed a late touchdown. Aaron Rodgers delivered, and they end up beating the Tennessee Titans, who fall to 0-2, final score 24-17. Jets' rare road favorite, winning and covering in the NFL. Like, that's like dinosaur style these days, but they did very late in the game. Breece Hall had a big game. Braylon Allen scored a couple of touchdowns when Hall came out of the game, so the Jets improved to 1-1, and they play Thursday. Meanwhile, the one of the late games, Cardinals-Rams, this game was over before it even started. Like, I turned on for the late games, and it was like 21-0. Marvin Harrison, 4 catches, 130, and 2 touchdowns. The story from the Rams out of this one. Puka Nacua on injured reserve. There's a chance right now they will not have Cooper Kupp for the immediate future. He left with an ankle injury. Meanwhile, Baker Mayfield, one of the big stunners of the day, they go to Detroit and win as underdogs 20-16 the final. Chris Godwin had 7 catches, 117 yards and a touchdown. Baker playing fantastic, running the ball into the end zone as well. And they gave, Detroit gave them some opportunities they shouldn't have had. Some interesting play calling as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Dan Campbell talks about that in our Sound Off segment. And also the New Orleans Saints go to Dallas and crush the Cowboys. Final 44-19. Alvin Kamara had one of those yearly games where he scores 3 touchdowns. It was yesterday. 115 on the ground and 3, 2 catches, 65 through the air and a touchdown. He was just absolutely fantastic. All right, 49ers, again, favorites going on the road and losing outright, 23-17. Minnesota Vikings come up with the win there. Sam Darnold played well. The Seahawks beat the Patriots in overtime, and Geno Smith needed to rally the troops late for this one. They end up winning. The Browns beat the Jaguars 18-13. Trevor Lawrence now has lost 7 games in a row. And the Raiders, 8.5-point underdogs and trailing by 2 touchdowns late in the game, come back to win 26-23. Crazy games yesterday in the NFL. All right, new AP poll is out. Texas is now number 1. The Longhorns have played fantastic football, whether it has been Quinn Ewers or Arch Manning. Manning threw 5 touchdowns over the weekend. Miami's also in the top 10. Georgia escapes in Lexington 13-12. Georgia got to get that offense going. And the Apple Cup very early on in the season, Washington State beats Washington by a final of 24-19. Usually they play this game. Don't they play this like the night, Thanksgiving night or something like that? But not this year, I guess. All right, Yankees, Red Sox. Yankees take 3 out of 4. They're controlling the division. Lots of words going back and forth with this one, with the Yankees and Red Sox arguing, fighting all weekend. Story for another day. We don't have time for it. Tyler Glasnow out for the season with an elbow injury. He packed up his gear and left this weekend in Atlanta before heading to Miami. Kind of bizarre story there. How about the Detroit Tigers, folks? They are right in the midst of this playoff chase, 2.5 games back of the 3rd wild card spot. They win again, 3 in a row. Maybe the Tigers sneak into the playoffs. Also, Alec Boehm has been activated off the injured list. He had a left hand strain. Over in Indiana, we got some updates on sports betting revenue. More than $300 million wagered online in sports books, pushing the year to date over $3 billion. How about Caitlin Clark over the weekend? 35 points as the Fever end up getting a win. And Caitlin Clark has been red hot for them. Asia Wilson, first player to score 1,000 points. John Rahm wins the Live Golf Tournament this week. Welcome back to Newswire here on SportsGrid. If you're a sports bettor in Washington, D.C., stay tuned because some of those kiosks that you see around town are going to look a little bit different in October. Let's bring in Matthew Waters from Legal Sports Report. We'll talk about that. By the way, everything we discuss over at LegalSportsReport.com. You can read about it as well. Matt, great to have you back here on Newswire. Hope you had a good weekend.
I did, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get started here. And, once upon a time when sports betting became legal, the first company to really be out in the forefront with it, not FanDuel, not DraftKings, it was actually Fox Bet, because Fox NFL Sunday popped up and it was like, boom, here's where you can bet, Fox Bet. Mixed results there. I would say probably didn't work out. But, boy, Fox had, a card in their pocket that they're pulling out here. I didn't even realize this, that they had the option to purchase a piece of FanDuel. Tell us more about that. Good move by them.
Great move by them. What happened, Craig, was that Flutter bought a company called the Stars Group, and the Stars Group was the company that partnered with Fox to run Fox Bet, which, just an aside, Fox Bet only closed a year ago. That it feels like it happened so much longer ago to me than just a year. But so that is mostly why Fox Bet wound up dying, because Flutter owned FanDuel, stronger brand. And so they just kind of did what they had to with Fox Bet. And then they came to the agreement last year that it was cut off. But Fox does have this agreement to buy an 18.6% stake in FanDuel. And it's been in court for a little while, and things were messy because of this. Part of it is the reason why we have Flutter listed in the US and not FanDuel, because Fox would have to give their approval toward any IPO moving forward. Now, Lachlan Murdoch, the CEO of Fox, said that they will be acting on this at an analyst conference last week. The main reason is because right now it will cost Fox about $4.3 billion to buy that stake. The stake is valued at has FanDuel valued at $20 million. And there was arguments over that too. Fox wanted to pay it $11 billion. And then FanDuel a couple years ago was saying, well, we're worth like $30 million. So they came in at $20 million. The estimate for FanDuel now, though, is it's worth about $35 billion as a standalone, not as part of Flutter. So that puts that 18.6% stake at about $6.5 billion. So Lachlan Murdoch came out and said, well, there's no way we're going to miss out on $2 billion on the table. That is essentially what it comes down to. They have this. And he said, by the way, we think it's going to keep growing. The tricky part about this, Craig, is that with a stake that big, anything over 5%, you have to be licensed in the gaming world. And so Lachlan said that they have started with these gaming licenses, and the deal cannot go through until then. Now, luckily, they have plenty of time. 2030 is when the deal would expire, the option would expire. So they will be able to do it at some point, but we don't know how long that'll take. It seems like the licensing process can move quickly in some of these new states with how fast the apps get up, but a lot of the states work off of temporary licenses, and it'll say something in the law to the effect of, well, if you already operate in 5 or more US states, we can just assume that you're okay. We'll give you that temporary license. We'll check the very, bare minimum things, and then we'll do a deeper dive into you. And Fox isn't going to have that luxury. So it'll take a little while to get them licensed. But the other part of it is he said, look, we love sports betting to interact with sports fans. I mean, they own half the NFL every weekend, right? And then if they get a stake in FanDuel, they'll just be even more incentivized. So it's going to be interesting to see how this goes. I always expected Fox to go through with this option because, again, FanDuel has just been on a rocket ever since sports betting started. But to hear that it is actually going to happen and that the licensing is through is definitely big news.
Yeah, I mean, having a piece of FanDuel or DraftKings at this point has to be on the positive side of ownership. Now, if you owned or the owners of Gambit were in play, that's probably not a good. That was not a good investment because Gambit, as we know, is now out of Washington, D.C. That's primarily where they were, and they had their form of, I guess, sports betting operation through these kiosks, is my understanding. And again, I'm reading about this over Legal Sports Report, but they've been out. We've known this for a while. But what we didn't know is who was going to be taking over these kiosks. And my understanding is there has to be more than 50 in place by the beginning of October. So without ruining the story completely, which sports betting company is taking over for Gambit? And what did I miss as part of the story?
Well, it is an interesting story. It's Caesars that's going to take over. And basically, at some point between today and October, they're supposed to get those kiosks in. It has to be in by that October date. It's interesting, Craig, because Gambit was a partnership between the DC Lottery and Intralot. And Intralot came into the U.S. thinking, well, we can get recreational bettors. And so we're going to juice those lines a little bit more. And the DC Lottery, unfortunately, said, okay, cool, we're with that. And it didn't work, right? We had, in the middle of the pandemic, Craig, you had people lining up around the block to go to the William Hill kiosk at Capital One Arena instead of betting online with Gambit. That's how bad the odds were. And so it's a bit poetic justice that Caesars is taking over because Caesars is the one that bought William Hill. So Caesars will now be in charge of all of those kiosks. Look, those kiosks have been the source of a few interesting stories from DC. We had one guy at a sushi shop take them for almost $1 million. They had to cut
Wow.
out some sports they were offering because of that. Um, the kiosks have been interesting, but Caesars is going to take over control of them now. And we had a little bit more news from DC last week as Fanatics is now live in the DC market as well. So it's a huge shift for DC, going from only Gambit being available throughout DC on your phone, except for those federal areas, to now you have Caesars, DraftKings, FanDuel, BetMGM. And the numbers show it. The numbers, they've been doing very well so far and compared to what it just was with Gambit. So DC sports betting, we're going to keep talking about it, Craig, because more people are looking at it saying, oh, maybe I can get in there. And the OLG tried for so long, the Office of Lottery and Gaming in DC, they tried for so long to say, look, COVID just ruined sports betting in DC. People work from home. We don't get the same kind of traffic. And we're seeing that, no, it was just a bad sports betting product.
Yep, would agree. All right, let's close it out here and end on this story that's now, I mean, it feels like it's a couple years old already. These allegations against these athletes that were at Iowa and Iowa State, if I'm not mistaken, they were, I believe they were found to do less doing or almost no wrongdoing as far as these allegations were concerned. And now everybody, of course, that was an athlete that was involved is now jumping back on board saying, well, you came after us, we're going to come after you. And I know there's an update in the case.
Well, and rightly so, Craig. We had four more plaintiffs join in, and a couple from Iowa State, a couple from Iowa. So it was 11 total. It was 10 athletes, and then I think a basketball manager who joined in. But basically, what happened was they used this technology to see where people were gambling on these apps to track hits on that, and it was done without a warrant. And the investigating body knew that they needed a warrant before they did it. So naturally, it all got thrown out, and now people are coming back and saying, "Whoa, we missed out on senior seasons for this. We missed out on, I dropped draft picks because of this. Whatever it could be. These guys were obviously affected, and so they want a little bit of that back."
Yeah. All right. Well, again, this is the problem here. Sometimes aggressiveness can get you in trouble. And on the flip side, maybe it'll work out for these student athletes who are suing. Thanks again, Matthew. We'll read about that story and everything else over at LegalSportsReport.com. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, sir. Take care.